second, all the way from Beijing, is the Western Academy of Beijing. Okay, let's get started when you're ready.
So this ready? This ready. Proteins constructive speech starts now. Definition: non-violent crime can be usually classified into three big categories, which is property crime, drug crime, and white-collar crime. And second, according to Merriam-Webster dictionary, the word only means few. So in this debate, we should debate whether this policy can serve vast majority or not. The core in this debate is not sending non-violent criminals can benefit vast majority or not. Framework: consequentialism. If pro can prove the benefit of only sentencing people convicted of violent criminals outweighs their harms, pro should win this debate. Contention 1. Prison is a disproportionate solution for non-violent criminals. Large amount of budget and resources have been put to incarcerate non-violent criminals, but without much effect. Data shows the current system is disproportionate, especially to non-violent offenders. So point A, making non-violent offenders violent. Poor and harsh environment of prison often renders non-violent criminals into violent criminals. According to BJS, 28.5% of non-violent criminals renders into violent criminals after their time in prison. First impact is harm to non-violent criminals. As prison makes non-violent criminals even worse, it makes them hard to re-enter to community. Second impact is harm to community and public. More community and public will confront violence, and this worsens household stability and public safety. So point B, ineffective punishment for non-violent offenders. Prison is particularly ineffective to non-violent offenders, but only leads them to continue their crime cycle. According to BJS, 82% of non-violent offenders recidivate in 5 years. Also, they are not just recommitting crime with the same method, but they're using more advanced technique. First impact is low cost effectiveness. According to William Spellman, it costs about $30,000 per year for a single prisoner. However, astronomical amount of money has been wasted without any change. Also, since this opportunity cost is extremely high, government's budget cannot be allocated to the departments and programs that desperately need financial support. Second impact is low rehabilitation effect. Recidivism rate over 80% shows rehabilitation effect of prison on non-violent offenders is extremely low. Contention 2, alternatives for non-violent criminals. Using alternatives can have better effect to non-violent criminals in many aspects. So point A, specific alternatives. First, for drug offenders, drug court can serve as an effective alternative. Drug court is a specially tailored system to deal with drug offenders and being lauded for low recidivism rate and cost effectiveness. NIJ's report states usage of drug courts resulted in public saving of about $7,000 per participant compared to prison. Also, drug court tries to deal with fundamental problems and in the same time helps offenders to adapt to community easily. Drug treatment programs are often paired with mandatory community service, thereby helping offenders to rehabilitate. Second, for low-risk property crime and probation. For low-risk property crime, probation and electronic monitoring can be a better solution. Releasing non-violent offenders saves a lot of money and enables us to implement long-term rehabilitation program, thereby improving probation system greatly. Also, probation is highly cost-effective as it only costs $3 per day to monitor one inmate, while that of prison is $80. With long-term rehabilitation programs such as vocational training and medical treatment, probation can deal with fundamental problems, thereby having better results in prison. For high-risk property offenders, we could use electronic monitoring. According to the NIJ study, the electronic monitoring significantly reduces recidivism rate 31% lower than other forms of correction. In addition, it is highly cost-effective since the cost of monitoring is 6 times lower than that of imprisonment. We can even maximize the effect by effective policing, including hotspot patrol. Position of offender will be tracked by GPS, and since certainty of being caught is a vastly more powerful deterrent than the punishment, this could have additional effect on reducing recidivism. Third, about white-collar crime, offenders are often not the one who is economically stranded, but rather morally bankrupted and materialistic. Considering these factors, fine and community service can be a better alternative. As offenders put much value on material, fine can have great deterrent effect. To foster offenders' morality, community service and community-oriented social diversion programs can work well. According to North Carolina University, community service can contribute to improving morality and community engagement, which fulfills rehabilitation and retribution at once. So point B, benefit to all offenders and society. Using alternatives to non-violent offenders not only help themselves, but also benefit other violent offenders and society as well. By not sentencing half of the entire prison population, we can have huge impact. First impact is addressing prison overcrowding. According to Forbes, the US prison system is at 103% capacity, and it contributes to increased inmate misconduct, which negatively affects the safety and security of inmates and staff. With alternatives to non-violent offenders, prison environment can be improved greatly. Second impact is cost. According to CNN Money, US is spending $80 billion just for incarceration, but With alternatives, half of this amount can be saved and can be allocated effectively to other departments and rehabilitation programs. Third impact is better rehabilitation effect. By saved budget and focused officers, rehabilitation effect will go up. We can provide 58% inmates who are in need of medical treatment and deal with fundamental problems, thereby breaking the cycle of crime. Currently, US is spending $40 billion just for incarcerating non-violent offenders with such ineffective and inhumane way for the last 50 years. This links to our framework in that not sentencing non-violent offenders not only benefit themselves by giving them proportionate punishment and solution, but also benefits other offenders in society by giving better rehabilitation program and promoting public safety. For these reasons, we strongly urge pro-ballot. Thank you.
My time will start now. We stand con on the resolution resolved in the United States criminal justice system. Only people convicted of violent crimes should be sentenced to prison. We'll start with definitions. Violent crimes are defined by legalmatch.com to mean offenses that involve the use of force or injury to the body of another person. The seriousness of a violent crime is usually determined by the degree of physical harm caused to the victim. The use of the weapon can raise the seriousness of the crime. Therefore, non-violent crimes are to mean any offense that does not involve the use of force or injury to the body of another person. Our framework is achieving the highest level of safety for U.S. citizens. In this framework, we place our focus on one thing and one thing only: whether the public will be safe. If we can prove that non-violent offenders present comparable dangers, then we shall win this debate. Contention 1, drugs and violence. Subpoint 1, drug offenders and social disorganization. According to American criminologist Martinez Jr., drug activity has, quote, robust effects on violent crime that are independent of other disorganization indicators, unquote. This means that no matter the racial composition, the economy, or any other variable, only drug activity has specific and important effects on the level of violent crime in the community. Furthermore, illegal drug use and trafficking activities were also linked to the socially disorganized section of the city. This social disorganization is critical to understanding this concept, as the theory suggests that, quote, one of the most important determinants of a person's later illegal activity is residential location. In fact, this is more important than the person's individual characteristics, unquote. Thus, we show that A, drug trafficking directly increases violence in a community, and B, drug trafficking increases the social disorganization of a community, which may also lead to worse future crimes. For this reason, we should not be treating drug trafficking as a minor offense. It is extremely severe and has detrimental side effects. Subpoint 2, the matter of justice for the public. The criminal justice system evaluates crimes based on their severity, and that is usually based on whether people have been hurt in the process or not. And with these guidelines, drug offenders are usually not considered violent offenders. But many people nowadays fail to look past the surface and see the high amounts of people who die from overdoses each year. If drug dealers really are not violent offenders, how do we explain the 72,000 deaths caused by drug overdoses just last year in the United States? According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, quote, every day more than 115 people in the United States die after overdosing on opiates, unquote. If killers are brought to justice, why shouldn't drug offenders also be brought to justice for damaging society just the same? Contention 2, criminal activities that can only be discouraged by prison. Subpoint 1, scammers and hackers. In the year 2017, there were 16.7 million American citizens that went through identity fraud, resulting in total a loss of $5.1 billion US in comparison to the 1 million people that were victims of violent crimes in 2016. Scamming and cybercrime are not classified as violent crimes, as they should not, but from the viewpoint of a society, both do just as much damage as violent crimes do. In the case of scammer and hackers, they hurt the economy of a country, and at extreme may hurt the global market as well. In order to keep U.S. citizens and their property safe, the only ways to keep these people away, and the most effective way of doing that, logically and realistically, is by sending them to prison, where they have no access to technology or otherwise, giving them no way to commit further crimes. Subpoint 2, traffic crimes. According to the USA Streets blog, there were 2,049 hit-and-run deaths nationwide in 2016, a record for the United States. Pedestrian deaths have also risen a sheer 25% in the past 4 years, and a study from the AAA Foundation has found that, quote, drivers are increasingly hitting people and leaving them for dead, unquote. According to the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, every day, There are 29 deaths in the United States due to drunk driving, and the annual cost of alcohol-related crashes totals to more than $44 billion US. Traffic crimes are hardly ever regarded as violent crimes. This has been proven once during the case of Begay versus United States, where the Supreme Court ruled that DUI is not a violent felony under the Federal Act of the Armed Career Criminal Act. But in fact, according to the National Safety Council, traffic incidents killed as many as 40,000 people in 2016. If we truly want to keep the American public safe, then we have to make sure drunk drivers and hit and runs are discouraged and sent to prison. This is why we urge you to vote con on the resolution. Thank you.
Any prep time?
Can I have a minute? Can I see their case?
Okay, starting now. So the prep time start once you show them the case. They're asking to see your case during the prep time.
Can I see?
Just like the case that you tried, they want to see the original cereal.
Yeah.
Okay, starting preparation time. Monty, sit back down. Starting now.
Okay, US, my first question is that US incarcerated hackers and cyber criminals for the last 50 years. Then why their recidivism is over 80%?
Repeat that?
I mean that US has incarcerated cyber criminals and hackers for the last 50 years if they are severe crime. However, they recidivate, and 80% of them recidivate after their prison time. Isn't it explained that prison is not a good solution for them?
Okay, but also if you put someone into community service at your local church, is that going to stop them from scamming people? No, right?
What? Yes.
No.
Because
Please
I
tell
will
me.
explain. We already said in speech that for those high risk cyber criminals or hackers, we can use GPS tracking, which has more deterrent effect by giving the certainty of veterans.
So you're going to be using technology against people who are using technology.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah? And
But
you believe that will work?
But however,
You believe that?
Yes, I believe it works because recidivism rate of them is already 80%, and considering that problem, we have to use this alternative because the status quo it shows that prison is not a good solution for them.
So my opponent thinks that if we use GPS to track down hackers, we're going to catch them. Is
But
that what you mean?
also
Is that what you mean?
hackers are those people who are morally bankrupt.
Hackers are people who
Yes, morally bankrupt. So we
compromise
can use
technology.
other solutions such as those community service to foster the recidivism rate.
What is community service going to stop
Community-
them from hacking stuff? What is it going to help? Please.
Okay, hacking is one of the crime that is morally bankrupted and materialistic, and also it harms those it is morally bankrupted and materialistic, which means we should use other solutions for them, and also considering that the prison solutions showed that they go to prison and they recidivate, and 80% of them recidivate, which means prison is not a good solution, and
Yes,
it's
but
time for us to use other solutions.
How is community service going to lower the recidivism rate?
Can I ask you a question? It's my time, right?
I did not ask a question yet. Can I ask one?
Really? You didn't ask me?
No, I did not.
Okay, go ahead.
An official question. So I want to ask you, how was Al Capone taken you
How
know,
what?
Al Capone, the
Michael?
criminal mastermind.
How what?
Al Capone.
Al
And,
Capone.
yeah, how was he taken down?
What is alcohol?
So, you know what? Forget it. So are property crimes nonviolent? They are nonviolent. Are
Yes.
they? Yes. And do they hurt people?
There are people.
Yes. Okay. Do you have a question?
There's a question. Many non-violent criminals renders into violent after their prison time. Then why should we incarcerate them to prison?
Repeat. Sorry.
Many non-violent criminals become violent after their prison time. Then why do we have necessity to
That's fine.
to send them to prison? Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Any prep time? 2 minutes, starting now. That's 2.
So, judge ready? Reporters ready? So my rebuttal speech starts now. So firstly, they're talking about the drug traffickers. However, there are several reasons that why drug traffickers should not be incarcerated in the prison. Firstly, drug problem is related to addiction, which means that if they deal with if they have to deal with just addiction, we have to address drug problems. In this sense, criminal justice system is unable to deal with this problem, and this problem should be dealt in public health system. Secondly, USA is trying to deal with drug problems for the last half century, but they failed to decrease demand of drug. According to CBS News, the US is leading the world in illegal drug use, which means that public's demand for drug is still high even after the US has declared war on drug. Therefore, even if drug traffickers are incarcerated in prison, someone else are very likely to take a place in that public is still buying, because public is still buying drugs. Therefore, prison cannot work with drug problems effectively, but rather intensifies poverty and racial inequality, because majority of drug traffickers are in poverty, and usually they are black and brown people. If we incarcerate them into prison, they cannot serve their family nor their community. Therefore, their community will be more likely to be vulnerable to poverty and racial inequality will be intensified. In this sense, and second of all, I want to address about their victim contention. And so, what is justice? According to Collins Dictionary, justice is fairness in the way that people are treated. Why do we necessarily have to traumatize those non-violent offenders to achieve justice? Locking non-violent criminals up in the prison is a disproportionate punishment for them. As we stated in our constructive speech, non-violent offenders are often rendered into the violent offenders after they serve prison, and this can not only traumatize non-violent offenders by themselves, but also pose additional threat to the community and society. Furthermore, if you think about more, we can find that those non-violent offenders are victims by themselves. Nearly half of population experiencing incarceration of family member ever receive public assistance, and over half them has mental health problem. This strongly suggests that many offenders are being marginalized from the society and have been deprived of many opportunities and education as they grew up. Therefore, incarcerating nonviolent offenders to such a harsh environment is certainly not a fair way to treat them, therefore contradicts the definition of justice. Also, we are not just punishing offenders themselves when you're incarcerating them. We are punishing offenders' family members, community, and future life as well. Also, I want to address about their hacker and about their white-collar crimes. So, they mentioned about the cybercrime is really harmful. However, according to prison policy, fraud which involves white-collar crime and cybercrime only accounts for less than 2% of entire non-violent criminal demographic. Also, not all of them have committed crime and that brought up to serious crime. Therefore, the opponents' impact should be trivialized. Also, I wanna they're still saying about the hackers, but they did not mention about how many hackers are in US and how. So they're just focusing on the small number while we are focusing on vast majority of people in the US. There's no perfect policy in the world. Every policy has its loopholes, but they share the same point and they're suitable and beneficial to vast majority of people. Therefore, since only some of hypothetical extreme examples can be classified as high severity, does that mean that we should give up this policy which is suitable and proportionate and beneficial to vast majority of people only because of those small number and hypothetical examples? Also, I want to crystallize my point in that about a third non-violent offenders are rendered into violent offenders after they serve in prison. So which means that their framework, which is achieving safety, cannot be achieved because a third of non-violent offenders are rendered into violent offenders and to jeopardize public safety. Thank you.
30 seconds.
Starting now.
So, rebuttal, not so the judges ready, opponents ready, partner ready, and my time will start now. So, our framework is about public safety, while our opponent's framework is about consequentialism, which is the notion that the morality of an action is to be judged solely by its consequences. I think our framework should be favored because, public safety is about the citizens, and a country's, well-being depends on its citizens. So that's why you should favor our framework. And moving on to my rebuttal, our opponents talk about recidivism, but in response, I assert that prison isn't counterproductive in that it causes recidivism. It's just not perfect. And just because the system's not perfect, it doesn't mean that we can just kick it out and write a new one, because that would take forever. And also, imagine if, because we know our school system, education system isn't perfect either, but does that mean that no kid should go to school because it's not perfect? No. And they also, our opponents also say that prison is also not productive, but to turn this argument around for us, in an article from the Huffington Post, reporter Matt Ferner describes several programs that are available to prisoners inside U.S. prisons, which sometimes even benefits prisoners more if they were not in prison. Such programs include Louisiana's Reentry Court Program, where younger prisoners were allowed to learn a trade ranging from plumbing to culinary arts. California's San Quentin's Prison University Program, and evidence from a study in 2013 suggests that prison university programs like such do reduce recidivism. The Ride Home program in California has former prisoners pick up newly released inmates in cars and spend a day with them. And also, according to an article to the U.S. News, writer Jeff Charles Carson explores University of Iowa's program, which brings higher education to inmates. And one person who has benefited from the program, Michael Davis Carson, states that after he gets out of prison, he plans to get his associate degree and his bachelor degree, which he will then use to support his wife and his family. Our opponents also talked about one of the colossal issues in United States today. One of the very much rising ones, mass incarceration. But to touch briefly on the topic, because as we know, the criminal justice system in America isn't about money, it's about justice. As suggested by the name. According to Peter Wagner and Bernadette Rugby from the Prison Policy Initiative, mass incarceration actually benefits the economy in certain ways. According to them, this money spent in mass incarceration goes towards paying staff as well as companies that supply goods to prison commissary or provide telephone service, including commissary vendors. All three industries benefit much from incarceration. Also, I want to ask you if the criminal justice program is about money. Well, I just said it isn't. Also, in the crossfire, we had a clash about using technology against technology. Well, it doesn't take a genius to see this flaw in this logic, which is how did these criminals actually evade the system in the start? Also, alternatives was actually another big part in my opponent's speech. However, I would like to let the cat out of the bag. Joshua Marcus, a distinct attorney, provides evidence to which alternatives to prison did not work, stating that the justice system had once tried to enforce programs to rehabilitate violent criminals and non-violent criminals at the same time. The result came in the form of crime being American citizens' biggest worries. German Lopez of Vox.com states that while local and state lawmakers have tried to reform the criminal justice system, their efforts always focus on offenses other than violent offenses. Other lawmakers argue that low-level offenders should be kept out of prison. Kept out of prison so violent offenders can be locked up, which might lead to more incarceration, going back to mass incarceration argument, not less, like many think. Finally, they also talk about our contention about drugs. To counter this, allow me to make a rather accurate analogy, which is if your house is attracting flies, please don't put your focus on killing or shutting the flies out. Focus on eradicating the source, which in this case are the drug dealers. And finally, how does government help a victim, the ones who really need help when he's dead of overdose? Thank you.
Okay. No? Okay, let's go.
So let's start. So you mentioned about in your rebuttal speech, you mentioned about mass incarceration is actually benefiting the United States in many aspects. However, we already said that because of mass incarceration, poor environment of jail prison is actually having exacerbates the prisoners. So how can it achieve public safety, which is your framework?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the second half of your question?
So because of mass incarceration, the prisoners are often the non-violent criminals are often rendered into violent criminals, and so that jeopardizes more public safety. Then how can you achieve your framework, which is achieving public safety?
So you're saying that because prisoners in prison isn't necessarily good?
No, you're saying that it's not necessarily good, but it has a significant harm to non-violent, especially to non-violent offenders.
Yeah. So like I mentioned in my rebuttal speech, there are several programs in prison. Does that answer your question?
But status quo is that a third of non-violent criminals even if we have a lot of programs, they're rendering into violent criminals right now. So how can you address with that?
Okay, I'm gonna ask you a rhetoric question. Do not answer it because we don't need to. Would you rest safer knowing that a criminal is behind bars, or would you rest safer knowing he's in community service like a local church?
Wait, can you restate this question?
Yeah, I know, but I'm answering it with a question you don't need to answer because
Oh,
it's a
really?
rhetoric.
Sure.
Okay. Rhetorical, I'm sorry. My question is, if you let the violent offenders out, don't you think it's gonna cause some kind of dispute in the American society and community?
So can you clarify your question? What kind of
So
dispute?
for example, if you say, okay, we're gonna release non-violent offenders, don't you think it's gonna cause a little uncertainty and a little bit of fear in the community?
But if prison is not a disproportionate solution to them, why they will have to feel that kind of feeling? Because we already said that majority of non-violent criminals are not severe, which means that prison is not a disproportionate solution for them.
Okay, you have a question?
Okay, so how can how can you deal with those non-violent offenders? Those are rendering into violent offenders.
So you want to ask me how to deal with the
Yeah.
violent offenders?
Yeah, because we cannot achieve public safety with them.
Yeah, we just keep them in jail. I mean prison. That's what you're asking me, right?
Not really, but
Okay, not really. Okay. Lastly, I want to ask you, like, what do you think? Like, as my partner said, you know, if you keep scammers and community services or any other kind of alternatives to prison, they still have technology at their hands. What do you say about that?
That's fine. Okay, preparation time? No? Okay.
Just ready.
Okay, so hold the microphone a little bit further and speak louder. Okay, let's try that. Just test it a little bit. Like talk loud.
My summary speech goes.
No, okay, hold it closer then. Do what you're doing.
Our summary speech starts now. First, their framework was public safety can be achieved by sending non-violent criminals to prison. However, we should know that 28.5% of non-violent criminals renders into violence during their prison time. Thereby, the public confronts more violence. Therefore, it is better to use specially tailored alternatives for non-violent criminals because it prevents them to become violent, thereby ensures public safety more better. And for second, they said justice for the public will be ensured by sending non-violent criminals to prison. However, 80% of non-violent criminals recidivated after prison time. It means prison produces more crime rather than ensuring public safety. And for third, they said prison is needed for hackers or cybercrime, but prison is broadly failing system for all non-violent criminals in that their recidivism rate is increasing, even if it is 82% now. And US has been wasting their $40 billion every year in last 50 years for this failure. This outweighs the single example of some non-violent criminals, which is hackers and cybers or drug offenders, because prison turns out to be a broadly failing system for non-violent criminals, so there's no reason it would magically work for some specific ones. That's why specially tailored alternatives to each non-violent criminals is needed to address 80% of recidivism of non-violent criminals. And fourth, about hackers and crime. Hackers and cyber criminals didn't reduce, hackers and cyber crime didn't reduce for the last 50 years, even though US industriously sent them to prison. It means prison is a failing system for hackers and cyber criminals, and US has no need to use failing prison system for them. US has no need to send them more since they commit more crime after prison. Also, prison is not perfect, even flawed, because 8 cases out of 10 recidivate after prison. Also, 30% of people turn into violent after their prison time. It's time for us to use another solution for them. And last, they said, using GPS to hackers doesn't make sense, but according to EJI, 19 states have successfully decreased both imprisonment and crime by using alternatives to incarceration. It means alternatives has big potential if more budget is invested.
That's fine.
Okay, that's why you should say more money and.
Okay, you said one?
How much? She's asking how much.
Wait, you have a row? No, you're con. You have three. Three, right?
Oh, okay, then.
2:30? I trust you. 2:30, let's go. Starting.
Okay.
That's 30.
My summary starts now. I'd like to ask everyone here a question. Why is it called the American justice system? Because we're giving people justice, right? So why not give justice to the victims of non-violent crimes? Our opponent's framework is consequentialism, which states that the morality of action is to be determined by the consequence that it gives. Appealing to their framework, the consequence of hacking can be great. Recent news headlines and documentaries shows that hacking can take things very, very far. A hacker can literally insert a virus into the government system during the time it takes you to get get a glass of water. Drug trafficking. What about those consequences? Like I showed you, if we let people sell drugs in communities, the community in the future will definitely have violent crimes, criminals rising out of it. So while our opponents try to tell you that incarcerating drug traffickers doesn't work, they are essentially going against their framework. Technology, as you all should remember, is usually based on code written by humans. And the ugly truth? Humans are biased. In a Forbes article titled, "Can AI Help Us Predict and Prevent Crimes in the Future?" the author talks about an AI that can supposedly predict crimes and recidivism rates. This AI, however, has been proven to be racist, to be biased towards white people, even while white offenders are frequently ranked at a lower risk in spite of having more extensive and violent criminal records. Suicide. What is it caused by? Harassment. And harassment is a non-violent crime, but it kills. And suicide kills. So why should we not give justice to victims of non-violent crimes? Kay Homowitz of The Atlantic describes a complicated relationship between crime and single-parented families while analyzing co-worker Philip Cohen's article. Philip Cohen tried to prove that family breakdowns were not to be blamed for the increased crime rate in the 1990s. However, he fails to prove this.
Yeah, that's sorry. Okay, any preparation time for Grand Cross?
So, I'm gonna start. Okay, so you mentioned about the drug traffickers, and since their harm is so big, they should be incarcerated into prison. However, do you believe that a number of drug traffickers will decrease after we incarcerate them in prison?
Yes.
How?
Because there's no one to sell drugs.
No, because there are demand in public, and many people are wanting the drug. The other people will take the place of them, and this cycle of crime will not be ceased.
What if we take away all the drugs? What if, because when you catch someone dealing drugs, you confiscate the drug so no one else can use it? Is that not how the American justice system works? Is that not how it works? Please answer.
What? So can you
So,
restate?
okay. When you catch someone dealing drugs, are you not supposed to confiscate the drugs? You just let it sit there. Is that what you do in America? Is that what Americans do?
Yes,
No,
well,
right?
actually, can you be like?
Okay, so when you catch someone dealing drugs and they have drugs nearby, you confiscate them, right?
What do you mean by confiscate?
You take them away,
Okay.
you put them under federal control.
Okay.
So tell me, how will other people take that drugs? Take those remaining drugs that they
So you
left.
mean that drug? So only if a person possesses a drug, he will be go to prison.
Sorry? Yes.
Okay, so listen here. You talk about how if we arrest drug traffickers, people will take their place, right? It's at least better than arresting the people on drugs, because that's not exactly solving the problem. Why, if you're arresting drug traffickers, you're actually solving the problem.
Yeah, but you didn't answer our question in that there is still a public demand on the drugs.
I did. I told you, when you arrest someone and they have drugs, you confiscate them. Nobody can use those drugs
So
again.
yeah, that means that public will not gonna like the drug.
Exactly. That's why they can't use it anymore. So there's not
So,
going to be anybody who takes their place.
After United States implemented the war on drug for about a few decades, there's no change.
Well, okay,
Yeah.
we can say that, but war isn't something that just happens. The effects of war doesn't just happen. You see, like the Great War, like a drug war like this. In America there's an opiate crisis, but we can't judge something based on its short-term effects, especially when it's something that has to do with everyday life. So you get what I mean?
Yeah, just you can ask a question. Yeah.
So what happens when citizens don't pay taxes?
Citizen pay taxes. Can you explain why this question is related to this?
All right, 2 minutes prep time.
we'll use them all.
Yep.
Yes. So, judge ready? Opponents ready? My final focus starts now. So our opponents talked about the drug traffickers, but we already said that prison is not a solution for drug traffickers, and that majority of drug traffickers are in poverty and usually black and brown people. So if we incarcerate them into prison, they cannot serve their family nor their community. Therefore, the community will be more likely to be vulnerable to poverty, and racial inequality will be intensified. And this is not the justice, but what they are talking about. Also, opponents argued that some non-violent criminals can have significant harm, but however, still, our impact outweighs their impact in that still 98% of non-violent criminals will be successfully treated by specially tailored alternative that we suggested. Also, they're talking about the justice, but 30% of non-violent criminals render into is the way that 30% of non-violent offenders render into violent offenders that's the way that we achieve justice? No. Also, when we think about more, we can already say that they are victims by themselves. Nearly half of those populations experience incarceration of family member, ever received public assistance, and over half have a mental problem. And so they're marginalized from the society. Also, we're not just punishing offenders themselves, but when we incarcerate them, we are punishing offenders, family members, community, and future life as well. And that's definitely not the way that we achieve the justice. Also, we want to crystallize our point in that. This outweighs the opponent's single example of severe nonviolent criminals, in that if prison is broadly failing as a system for nonviolent criminals, and then there is no reason that it would magically work for this special one. They're arguing, so when prison increased crime creates more victims and harm more people and continues the cycle that voting pro has a chance of addressing. For these reasons, we strongly urge pro ballot. Thank you.
Judges ready? Opponents ready?